morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Talking Point here on WESN, your content capital, and also, always remember, the only station in the nation broadcasting in HD. And I have a couple of interesting things to get into. Some might be continuations of recent events, but some are continuations of stories that have been somewhat left under the surface there, bubbling, waiting to come up again. And boy, do I find it interesting what one judge had to say. For more on what I'm speaking about, let's kick off the daily review. I have said that I think education is one of the areas in our society, in our country, that has major, major issues. I have also said I think that our education system is potentially underfunded despite having the largest allocation of our national budget. I believe it's over 10%. You know, it's 2 billion, about 1 to 2 billion more than national security. Well, one of the factors or signs or symptoms that has led me to come to this conclusion is what has happened and now is happening with EFCL. Because High Court Judge Carol Gobin had to dismiss a petition by EFCL from the company's board in an attempt to wind up the company, which would, I believe, would have left the situation of the hundreds of millions of dollars in unpaid fees owed to contractors and service providers. They would be left with only having approximately $50,000 in what remains of EFCL assets to be liquidated to pay off hundreds of millions of dollars of debt. The Minister of Finance did say in the mid-year budget review that they will now utilize something along the lines of $3 billion. This is separate to the VAT refunds to pay off contractors. I could be wrong, I could be misremembering, but I do remember to pay off contractors, he said that. Does that include EFCL contractors or it doesn't? Because the judge, kudos to this judge, she's not playing games on this one. She's not beating around the bush, I think, either. Now, apparently, there's always a chance for EFCL to appeal Justice Gobin's decision. But the thing is, the judge has called out EFCL. You don't have money to pay the debts. Why did you litigate this matter for so long? Why did you not consider the effects that this would have on the Treasury, on the public purse? But also, why are you trying to say that winding up is an alternative? And the judge is like, that's impermissible because given the level of control that is exercised by the state, the recommendation claimed, she used the word, the recommendation to wind up. Because she is saying that the board, or rather the board is saying, we think it's in the best interest of EFCL. And the judge is saying, yeah, I think the government told you to say that. And government told you to do it this way. That's basically what's being either said or implied. And the debt has been allowed to mount. Now it's been acknowledged, I believe, by the court. She has recognized that MTS has taken over the services. And what she said was, what has been achieved from the move over from EFCL to MTS facilitates a troubling degree of arbitrariness. It raised suspicions of deliberate manipulation to wield unfairness and unequal treatment of creditors. Also, Judge goes back to 2018 and say that the Minister, Camille Robinson-Regis, acknowledged the debt, stated that contractors would eventually be paid. I guess we can't always believe what Minister Camille Robinson-Regis has said. So she's not having this wind-up proposition, right? And EFCL was ordered to pay the legal costs for the companies that had to intervene in EFCL attempting to wind up. This is, the company has 79 unsatisfied judgments or awards dating back to 2016, totaling to $321 million, 30 pending lawsuits that are over $119 million, and legal claims that are at $47 million. Legal claims at $47 million. So when Justice Gobin says the irresponsibility of continuing these legal matters, you don't have the money to pay for it, and you're mounting legal costs, and you're losing. Now, I would just like to point out, because one might want to say, well, it was the partnership that did a lot of those decisions, or whatever. Maybe, right? I can't remember the timeline at this point. Regardless, it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, not the PNM government, not the UNC government or the partnership government, the government of Trinidad and Tobago took this course of action, regardless of which party did it and if there was a transition. These debts, unless it could be proven that the services rendered, that the product delivered was not up to par, was not delivered at all, or something went wrong along those lines, these debts, I would imagine, have to be honored. If not by EFCL, by the government. Because it's not as though EFCL was a non-government entity or private entity or what have you. As far as I am aware, it's a state-run entity meant to manage state-run assets, state-run schools. They don't manage government-assisted schools. So I just like to point out the fact that the THA administration is basically saying we have no money to pay a certain contractor that's potentially using extortion to try and get his money. If the government could do this to EFCL, why can't the THA just tell that guy, hey, you're $100 million, go to the PNM for that. We didn't do that. Why not? And the thing is, this was a slick way to do it, right? We get the state company to wind up, and we'll just potentially wipe away all of that debt. First of all, I would just like to ask anybody, look at the conditions that we have in the country. It makes what Karen said about battered syndrome even more pertinent, in my opinion. People don't want to speak out against government because they're afraid to lose if they have government contracts or lose out the potential of getting government contracts. But then look at these government contractors. What this is supposed to be is a clear signal, right, to all private businesses that, listen, your government money is not guaranteed. To be fair, though, I think most contractors, even before COVID, are very much experienced with the phenomenon of government taking forever to pay them. This is what goes on in TNT. We have people that are dependent or even want to be dependent. There's a difference between our government and, say, the UK or the US, you know, as much as their politics is going crazy right now, especially the US or Canada. Government debt in those countries, I don't think is treated like this. And this should be a clear signal to the credit ratings of S&P and Moody's. Really? Really? We're stabilizing? We're a good place to do business? Not with the government. Oh, wait. Foreign direct investment might get preferential treatment, I guess. That's why they can't pay the local guys. And the local guys will take the abuse and then go back up to the headmaster and say, please, sir, can I get some more? Literally, what they say, singing for the supper? So it'll be interesting to see where this goes and what's happening with MTS, given the fact that from what we understand, the practices that led to this situation with AFCL, at least within the current administration, was not discontinued. So to some extent, the current government has a responsibility over the situation reaching where it has reached. By the way, it's the acting CEO that's having to deal with this, because as far as I remember, we tried to get the CEO and the chairman of the board on this show to comment, and they refused. I wonder why. Once it all started to go down, when a justice of the peace had to go and start to claim assets for one creditor, but there's not enough to go around. I don't think they own the building, so Lord only knows with regards to if that's still being rented out. I don't know. I wonder if that's being paid. I don't know. Anybody wants to call in and correct me on anything I've just said, feel free to do so. I need to move on because the Prime Minister sent a pre-action protocol letter to the whistleblower. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'll just try and be brief. First of all, Mr. Chief Secretary, I get it. I understand it might be an attempt at intimidation. Here's the thing. You have not made a report, but you sent a letter to the police saying investigate this. I wonder why you haven't made a report. I have to ask that question. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just wondering, is it that you don't want to go on the record outside of the THA because you need THA protection to say what you want to say outside the court of public opinion? In the court of public opinion, the Prime Minister, if it's left there, could send a pre-action protocol letter, right? Because potentially it's slander, especially if you're not willing to back it up and fight for it to be proven. Now, the trick is, yes, it all depends on if the guy lied or if the Prime Minister's lying, right? And the Prime Minister's doubling down. So whoever's lying is going to get hit with a double whammy. The Prime Minister will get probably countersued potentially or have to pay legal costs for this matter if he is bluffing. And if he is not bluffing, well then, that's the whistleblower and your reputation. And I do find it interesting that the whistleblower, here's the thing for the unfortunate gentleman. He didn't want to go public. He went to you. You stabbed him in the back and put it out there in the public sphere. So I do wonder, to some extent, is he really a whistleblower? I mean, maybe, maybe not. But usually one would think a whistleblower would want to reveal this to the public. No, he went to you. Now the question is, what exactly was he looking for going to you and not going to the public? Was he too afraid? Did he want it to remain anonymous? Who knows? There's further speculation that could be had there. But again, this is why it needs to be investigated to some extent to prove what happened. At the end of the day, it's out there, you cannot unring the bell, unfortunately, for whoever is in the right in this situation. So I'm not necessarily going to disagree with the Prime Minister's attempts to defend himself, just saying, I hope you know what you're doing, because if you're bluffing and you get called, good luck. But Mr. Chief Secretary, your whole handling of the situation, I just can't agree with at all, and I don't know what else to say. Without it being a personal attack, I don't know what else to say, because I am just flabbergasted that this has reached this far. I mean, the man, clearly, you recorded him and revealed him and exposed him without his permission. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what it seems like to me. Okay, quick. This might be the last story that I'll get into the morning. I have to pull up short here. Something that was both slightly amusing and a bit distressing. And that is the fact that, well, a lady was arrested and charged for a powdery substance that ended up being Midol. And now I believe she is awarded $75,000 because the police could not tell the difference between crushed Midol and cocaine. And the best part, I believe, is where the officer admitted that she made no checks or inquiries to determine whether the accused was telling the truth about the substance before charging her, and she had no information, or I guess you could say further evidence or reason for suspicion that the woman was in possession of illegal drugs. Now, to some extent, all of that is kind of fine, at least the second part. But the first part about making checks. Now, the lady was acquitted after the lab results. A lab tested it, and the results came back that it was not cocaine, it was Midol. But one would think, you know, maybe there would be ways to kind of unofficially test this on the streets to say if it's a narcotic substance, if it's a benign substance. The thing is, this mistake, to be fair, I do feel that this is not a clear-cut case where the police officer was 100% wrong. I could see where you kind of do things right and this mistake could happen, but there's something, at the same time, I would hope that there would be ways for police officers to be able to know the difference on the street so that we don't really have these mistakes. I'm not an officer, so I don't know what the challenges are. But there should be some kind of way. I mean, I get it. Who expects someone to have crushed Midol tablets? Maybe she had tablets and they were crushed in her bag. Maybe she crushes them to put it in a drink. I don't know. The test results came back. They were what they were. So, $75,000 because a mistake was made. Maybe it was overzealotry, but you know what? Some might argue they're rather overzealotry than indifference and laziness. Catch-22, folks. Law enforcement is not easy. But learn the lesson. Ask around. Phone a friend from another jurisdiction and another police force. What do you do so that you don't have to wait for lab test results? Or rather, is our lab too slow? Because this lady had to go through the whole rigmarole of being arrested, charged, bail, etc., 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 to the point where she's awarded compensation. Why is it that our system is so inefficient? I mean, is this another way to redistribute? Well, this is not what economists that believe in socialism, this is not what they had in mind. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get now further into the procedural side of what happened in the THA with the chief sex presentation, because we should have the minority leader with us. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point at WESN, your content capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the right and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
On the next episode of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Did you ever find out who was the person that shot you?
Yeah, actually I didn't know. In my mind I was saying, you know, I wonder if this young boy, if he wasn't here now, you know, how I would have interacted with him. And I said, I would have liked to just talk to him to find out, well, bro, what's the reason why you would have done something like that?
We missed the countless battles that he would have been fighting and you know, the battle of the body, trying to treat with what has been, what would have happened, the battle of the mind, the battle of the emotions, and the battle of the spirit.
Could it be that I can still fulfill all of what I want and all God wants in me, with the fact that I still am unable to see past my nose?
It is normal to feel anxious about our tomorrows, but tomorrow will worry about itself.
If I must fail, a little pain along the way. Before I complain, I gotta give praise. I still have God and I still got bread. Before I complain.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And as promised, I am joined by the minority leader of the THA, the man who looking back, I do wonder, when you went up for elections, Mr. Kelvin Morris, did you think that you would be put in the middle of all of this minority leader, and then now you have to deal with this controversy and that controversy? Is this what you signed up for?
Never in a million years. Let me say good morning, Sean. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. But never in a million years. I simply got into politics to serve, and then I'm thrown into the thrust of the front line, having to be the lone voice for the PNM in Tobago at this time.
Well, now let's get into that, because of course we have the THA Chief Secretary and the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. They are more or less dueling indirectly in the public sphere over media houses, media channels, media interviews. And of course, the Prime Minister, he had a press conference where he said, well, according to his legal advice, this sort of thing should not have been allowed at all. That is to say, the Chief Secretary's presentation. I can't remember the standing order he quoted, but it needed to be vetted, and I believe the assumption that is, since the presiding officer could not have vetted the statements of the individual, there's no way for her to find evidence of it to be proven, then it should not have been allowed. But the Chief Secretary is basically saying that in areas where the standing orders are silent, the presiding officer, well, had the capacity to make the decision, which I find is somewhat interesting because it leaves a lot of doors open. So he also said that the protections extend to everybody participating. I would question if a video recording of someone who did not know he was being recorded is him participating in the THA. Protections, etc. So as far as you know, because he said you need to give your Prime Minister a copy of the standing orders, what is your take on it?
So the Chief Secretary is being very convenient with his interpretation of the standing orders. And just for clarity, the standing orders 92, 1, 2, and 3, which speaks to rules in cases not provided for by standing orders. And that means where the standing orders are silent, where issues in the standing orders are silent, then it says, in any matter not herein provided for, resort shall be had to the usage and practice of the House of Representatives of Trinidad and Tobago, which shall be followed as far as the same may be applicable to this assembly, and not inconsistent with these standing orders nor with the practice of this assembly. So that is to say, the standing orders does not give the presiding officer carte blanche authority to ascribe upon herself interpretations to which the standing orders does not allow. It says where it is silent, then you revert to the practices of the House of Representatives, which is the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Therefore, it is not for the presiding officer to make up rules as on the fly or be very, subjective to what is applied. What we had in the House was a flagrant breach of the standing orders. In fact, it was disgraceful to view. I was astonished that the presiding officer would allow unverified, unsubstantiated information to be read into a speech, into a statement. And let me from very early distinguish what the standing order says with respect to statements. So a statement is different from a motion. The statement, only the mover of the statement, which in this case was the Chief Secretary, has the ability to really contribute. And therefore, every statement that comes to the House must be previously vetted by the presiding officer. She must ensure that it's in keeping with the standing orders. And therefore, you must read verbatim, word for word, whatever the statement has. I have a copy of the statement, and it is quite interesting that many of the things that were read into the records into the House was not part of the original statement that was circulated. So that is the issue number one. What the Chief Secretary read and what was circulated is quite different.
So that's issue number one. But I do have to ask, so he had a statement, it was not what he intended, right? It's not what you saw, I assume, leading up to this,
what was
right? So you were
to each member thereafter
for what he gave. Yes. And the thing is, though, now that is one aspect, but the whole idea that, okay, it was a statement on a motion, so you don't get to respond in the House. Explain why that is important.
That is very important because when you go to Standing Order 45.8, Standing Order 45.8 says that the conduct of the President of the Republic, members of the Assembly, members of Parliament, or of judges or other persons engaged in the administration of justice shall not be raised except, and this is critical, it shall not be raised except upon a substantive motion moved for the purpose. And in any moved amendment or debate on a motion dealing with any other subject, any reference to the conduct of any such person as aforesaid shall be out of order. So in other words, unless you bring to the House a substantive motion to deal with the conduct of the President, members of Parliament, judges, or members of the Assembly, at no point should the presiding officer allow any member to raise this. It shall be out of order. Therefore, in the first place, had the presiding officer applied the rules of this standing order, the content that was read into the statement should not been allowed and should not have been allowed to be read into the House. So in the first place, this statement, based on what was read into the records, should not have been approved, and therefore we should not have even been having a debate unless it was a motion. So the presiding officer in this case would have failed to apply the standing order and therefore allow the House to be brought into odium and disrepute. And I am saying here today, it is my intention as the minority leader and to file and move a motion in the House of no confidence against this presiding officer who would have facilitated this great breach, this great abuse and misuse of the House and the parliamentary privileges that the Chief Secretary so used to slander public officials without them having the opportunity, or without anyone having the opportunity to debate or respond.
Now, I understand the difference, the technical differences, and why it's important. But to some extent, there's also those who would say, and I would agree with them to some extent, that look, yes, the Prime Minister might have gone through the correct hoops and crossed his T's and dotted his I's when he did the email gate presentation via a motion, and perhaps the Chief Secretary was nowhere near as correct when he did his. But the general idea was more or less the same. I'm going to put this out there, and I'm going to use the protections of the legislative body to basically, I'm going to hide behind it, right? And I'm going to use it to my political advantage. What would you say?
I reject that out of hand. I reject that out of hand. The circumstances were quite different. If you look at what the Prime Minister was dealing with Emailgate, we all had the question of Section 34 in our minds: what would have transpired, how it transpired, why it transpired, and therefore information came to him that explained certain situations. And while he would have taken steps to have the president, because the Prime Minister didn't take it upon his own, he sent the information to the president for the president to treat with respect to the Integrity Commission. And when he was satisfied that no real action was taken, he then brought it to the attention of the Parliament. And even when the investigation began, there were a number of information that was that correlated, and we all come to understood that there were a number of things happening that made sense in those emails. So while there are still questions as to the email thread, the content remains very relevant, because you would have recognized it spoke about bugging of I think the then DPP office, and we all came to find out that that happened. It talked about persons being offered judge seat on the seat of the DPP, being offered a seat on the judiciary. That we found out perhaps happened as well. So there was a number of situations that actually happened. In this situation, the Chief Secretary was completely reckless. He took absolutely no step to substantiate the information. So what he came to the House with was a story to simply save himself from an ongoing police investigation. It was the Chief Secretary trying to utilize a window to sort of get the public on his side and to avoid being investigated.
I want to ask about that, because the order of how the Prime Minister says he did it, went to the authorities, then went to Parliament. The Chief Secretary has gone to THA and has then sent a letter to the police. He has not actually given a report, which I am wondering, is it that he doesn't necessarily want to put anything that he says on record outside of the protection of the Assembly? But I have to ask, so there are differences with how things were done. But is there any sort of recourse if there is enough evidence, say, to say that he did something wrong? I understand filing the motion of no confidence against the presiding officer, but currently, right now, we know that that's not going to go through, right? Unless public pressure becomes undeniable, which I don't think it's going to be to that level anytime soon. Is there anything that could be done with regards to the THA if it more or less they're in breach of their own standing orders?
Well, as you rightfully said, the leverage I have is within the House, which is to bring motions of no confidence. However, I have seen learned senior counsel who was so named also challenging the Chief Secretary, and he should be man enough. If he believes, because he took this information to the House, so it means that he believed that the information was credible. So if he believes the information is credible, he should step out of the confines of the House and parliamentary privilege, and he should then repeat those calls and therefore cause this to have the kind of vetting that he believes it deserves. Because you will recognize, after the Chief Secretary so recklessly went to the House and made those claims, he has failed to make those claims outside of the House. And that suggests to me that it was clearly about being mischievous. It was clearly about being reckless. And it was clearly about creating doubts in independent independent offices of the state. And therefore, this is a chief secretary that you have to ask the question. Can we trust a man so dangerous, a man that would admit as well? And this was I was quite flabbergasted about the fact that you, as a sitting chief secretary, a man that have meetings of all kinds with all kind of person, would admit that you recorded someone without their permission, and you took that that illegitimate recording. You took that recording that was not permitted by the individual, and you brought this to the house without the person's consent. How can we trust someone like this?
Well, I'll have to, Mr. Morris, I'll have to end you there because we're over time. So I didn't want to necessarily cut you in mid-sentence, but we have to close there. So I want to thank you for giving us, you know, some knowledge, and you're right. That standing order, not standing order, but that precedent of following the House, that has come up before. So it'll be interesting to see now where the debate and the discussion goes. But thank you for joining us again.
You're most welcome.
And stay safe out there with all the crime and public health situation. Stay safe and good luck to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Keep good. All right.
Well, folks, we have to take a break. When we come back, we're gonna speak about the upcoming celebrations in advance with regards to Emancipation Day. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point on WSN, your content capital.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there. Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day. Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back 3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
As a goat farmer, I had 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow named Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago, you know.
As you age, there is an increased risk of being diagnosed with arthritis, but younger individuals can get affected as well.
When you tell them, but no, I need you to move your joints. You need to move it, otherwise it gets stiffer and it exacerbates the problem. There's that misconception that if I move it, it's more pain.
So if you're to focus on these risk factors, then to me, it will help a large portion of the population, probably prolong, I should say, the inevitable, because inevitably you will develop arthritis.
What's Up Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m.
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking Points, ladies and gentlemen. And I forgot to apologize on behalf of my co-host, Keaton Shaw. He's not able to join us. He actually has a personal errand that he has to run this morning. I know, right? But it's Friday, and of course, we are joined by none other than youth influencer and attorney at law and commentator extraordinaire, Janelle John Bates. Woo!
Hi, good morning. Thank you for that very exuberant welcome.
Well, you know, I do enjoy, you know, having to do the show by myself sometimes. It's very much welcome to have good conversations on important issues with people that are able to give me more than just blame so-and-so. Because that's why it comes down to a lot in this country, right?
It's true.
Just blame so-and-so.
Yes.
And I mean, that's a phenomenon across the world.
Is it?
I
feel
think
like
so.
in Trinidad we have a particular knack for not taking personal responsibility.
Look at America. The Republicans say blame the Democrats. The Democrats say blame the Republicans.
Right.
And so on it goes. Right? So
maybe it's human nature.
It's human nature. But that's why one could argue it's unique and needs to be treasured and protected. Good conversation.
Right.
Now, this is not necessarily directly a political topic that we're getting into with regards to the local government elections, but one could argue this does impact politics based on how the racial division in our politics is, and it is a social issue that is politically important around the world. Now, we have Emancipation Day coming up.
We do.
Next week, Tuesday. And I actually found it interesting. I do wonder if, as a Caribbean island with, of course, direct history with regards to Emancipation Day, we're not just some country that was kind of like secondary or indirectly involved. You know, we're directly as a result of the practices.
Being a former colony.
Being a former colony that started off with slave labor. Right. Sugar plantations. I don't know if culturally, societally, we truly rarely appreciate it in the right way.
I would say I have to agree with you. And I don't know if it's because of when emancipation is celebrated. I was thinking about that. Emancipation being celebrated on the 1st of August, in the middle of the July-August vacation. I hear we're calling it Java now. You know, a lot of what we learn and a lot of what we celebrate comes from what we learn in school.
Yeah.
There is no school at that time.
Yes.
So where are we given the opportunity to inculcate the celebration of emancipation or encourage from young, because you have to encourage people from young to recognize certain things. So how can we get it culturally ingrained?
Because what made it worse is that when I was growing up, that was Great Race Weekend.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Right.
Well, sorry, no, not Great Race Weekend, but if there was a weekend around that time, obviously,
yes,
right?
It became more of a party versus...
And then it became a party weekend,
yes.
right? So it became a party time. So the weekend might not be August the 1st as it isn't now, but it's a party time this weekend in Tobago.
Right.
And who's really going to, you know, the race was moved.
Right.
But I think also your point is correct. The fact that, well, yeah, we never learned about it in school.
I don't recall really learning about it in school. I did history up to Form 6.
Yeah.
And yes, it basically ended, and yes, 1834, emancipation, 1838, when they were really free because they had the 4 years of apprenticeship. And this morning I was thinking, what was the 4 years of apprenticeship for? That's a, by the way, discussion I was thinking, because why would you need to be apprentice to something that you were doing for years and years? I thought to myself, why didn't I ever think about that before?
I could barely remember it. This is the thing, right? I could barely remember that aspect of it. I would assume it was a political thing to kind of get emancipation through without, you know, removing it completely.
Well, actually, I mean, the proclamation was in 1833. It was passed, the bill was passed in the parliament in 1833, it was declared in 1834, and my understanding is it kind of gave that 4 years more for the planters, the colonial masters to kind of become accustomed, and it was also a period for them to get some compensation. But, I mean, how did they convince for the people who were enslaved, because we're not calling them slaves, they are people who were enslaved.
Well, to some extent,
how did they sell it to them?
Think about it.
Yeah.
When it was being sold, they were slaves.
When it was being sold to them,
when the idea and the concept, they were slaves. So there's much room
for
to
them
disagree,
to argue of
right?
needing a 4-year apprenticeship.
And then, like, if you're going to be free in 4 years, why revolt now? Why
Well, I
risk your
suppose
life
so.
now?
Well, I suppose so. So I
Right.
guess it was an easy sell, right? So we had...
I mean, part of it too is, the other thing is, think about it, like, the concept of it and all. It's not as though I'm explaining to you that the grass is green and the sky is blue and water is wet. I'm not explaining to you a natural phenomenon. I explain to you this thing that I made up in order to be politically expedient for the people that I want to benefit at the time.
I suppose.
So some of the slaves at the time who might not even understand aspects of Western culture and Western law and legalese.
Yes, freedom, apprenticeship. What do
that?
those words mean?
I don't know. I just know I'm in chains. I'm going to be out of chains? Okay,
right.
cool.
I suppose. So I guess, but in terms of a modern Trinidad, I guess, what does it mean to us?
Yes.
What does it mean to us?
Because I do find it interesting. One of the thoughts I had was, there are those who kind of hold on to the negative, the oppression of slavery, as though they were slaves themselves somehow, right? And then they kind of, I think there's one of the root causes of the division is the fact that slavery and indentureship are not the same. And because those experiences were not the same, there will always be that sense of, well, y'all didn't go through what we went through. And I feel as though, while I understand that it was not the same, it's like, we do have to kind of figure out how to, like, not stay stuck in that past. That's part of it.
Well, you said so much there. I had like several thoughts going through my head. The first being, you were saying that some of us are stuck. And before you mentioned the word indentureship, I thought you were meaning to say a lot of people from of Afro-Trinidadian or African descent are stuck on the egregious nature of slavery. But the matter, what I would argue is the flip side, that the slavery has been, in a sense, whitewashed, and I'm not trying to be racist using the word whitewash, that's just the word, but it has been whitewashed and downplayed, the harmful effect physically, mentally on the enslaved people themselves and transmitted through generations. I think it has been whitewashed. And I was actually listening to a clip talking about there are actually places, and even in the Caribbean, where you can go on a plantation tour. But what they said is, that person was speaking about the plantation tour, said they did a survey before and after the tour, asking people what they knew about slavery before and what they knew about slavery after. And it was the same, which was nothing. Because the tours, they have watered down and romanticized the experience of slavery. So we don't want, and I can understand, we don't want descendants of colonial masters to feel bad all the time that their ancestors did this. But again, we have to face the reality. It was a horrible experience.
Well, right. So when I said when I said what I said, it wasn't to face the reality or to acknowledge it, because I did say I don't think we really like give it its due to like understand the gravity of what it was.
Yes.
But more, I feel as though it's more used like to win a fight, as opposed to
divide us.
To divide us, as opposed to this happened,
right,
and we need to acknowledge it and not celebrate it, but it's kind of like...
Let's celebrate the emancipation part versus the...
Well, there's the other thing. How much do we really celebrate about it? Because I feel that should be like fireworks.
Well, then that's so before. The other thought I had...
Not necessarily Great Fete Weekend,
but the other thought I had when you then went down the route of indentureship is that emancipation seems to be a holiday that is only recognized or celebrated, and I can't even say by all, by some, dare I say, conscious members of the Afro-Caribbean community or the Afro-Trinidadian community. And I would like it to become more of a national festival. And maybe it's because of what you said, that some non-African groups or non-African descendants in the country perhaps feel isolated for various reasons. Maybe they feel like some Africans may be using it as a bargaining chip to say, well, we went through more, or those who were descendants of colonial masters feel bad, so they don't want to talk about it, or they just don't understand it.
You know, in the States, there's this like, all of a sudden, a hard line with regards to cultural appropriation. Right? So it's like, you can't wear the dress of a different culture, or the hairstyle.
I think America, they have gone extreme with that whole...
Right.
They clearly don't know the difference between celebration, appropriation, and recognition. There's a difference.
Right, and sharing the experience.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, you can make the argument too, Indian Arrival Day, Emancipation Day, these things are major milestones for the country that makes us who we are.
And we all, I think all Trinidadians need to recognize... Now, I have participated in a few of the emancipation processions in downtown. You know, we have that walk on Emancipation Day. And I have seen people who are not phenotypically Afro presenting in the festival or the procession, but there are few. But as I was thinking about it this morning, I wondered why. Again, is it because others feel uncomfortable to come in a procession where people are all dressed in African wear, but then when it's other holidays, Trinidadians have no problem wearing clothes of other ethnicities in the country? I always feel like, why is there no...
I mean, this is a bit more of a lighthearted example, but there was a phenomenon when the movie Black Panther came out.
Right.
And I'm acquainted with somebody who is, you know, not Afro descent.
Right.
There's no mistake. He is,
Right.
I think he might be Portuguese descent or something like that. You know, he is white. But he was a legit fan forever.
Right.
But of course, that whole, I mean, of course in the States as well, again,
Yes.
craziness, right? You saw where
I think that
the
it came out
racial
during the Black
division-
Lives Matter too, so that probably
Right,
didn't help.
it didn't help, but you saw how far it could go, and these sort of topics tend to be sensitive, and I understand to some extent. Look, Holocaust survivors are sensitive as well, but it's sensitive in what way? Because I would think sharing in the celebration and learning about what happened and being able to participate will help educate better, as opposed to, no, it's not for you. Go away, it's not for you.
I agree. So there's work to be done on all sides, all individuals in Trinidad. We need to find a way that every Trinidadian can feel comfortable to celebrate and recognize that is an important milestone. 50% of the country, more or less, I don't know, CSO, correct me if I'm wrong, is of Afro descent. That was a large population of people who were not even viewed as people.
Yeah.
There's a large population of people who were stripped of their identity, and I think some of those psychological ramifications from slavery still live on today. I think that may contribute to why a lot of young Afro males, it is arguable why they are often caught up in certain activities because of a sense of identity as an Afro-Trinidadian, identity as a Trinidadian, identity as a young male. There's so much things.
I mean, there is a part of me that does want to, is weird. I think slavery kind of happened at a transition point in history. Because there have been a lot of atrocities in the past that, you know, people have just had to, well, it was just with the way the world was, right? You just had to get over it. You know, civilizations were destroyed in some cases. But slavery was in this unique time where we were moving past that. You know, we were kind of still in it. We still had major wars. We still had a lot of death and, you know, World War I, World War II, the wars in Africa, colonization, the wars in the Middle East, the wars in South Asia. But we were transitioning to a point where, well, no, we're not necessarily gonna just, oh, you conquered that person, oh, that's fine. We're not gonna accept certain things anymore.
So
it's an awareness time in history because awareness is increased, but at the same time, it came from history where, well, humans weren't nice to each other on a whole.
Well, humans are still not nice to each other, and then
but that is true.
But you know, and then there's the argument of why was there even an end to enslavement in the Caribbean? So that's a whole other topic. It's not necessarily, some would argue, it's not because we liked these people. It's because it became economically not viable to have slavery anymore. That is one of the arguments I think Eric Williams posited in his book. It was a decline in the plantations. It did not make economic sense to continue to have these plantations with enslaved people.
I think it was more that it didn't make political sense.
Well, it was, so again, as I said, I did history.
What I would go
I did history, and I argued all the different factors why it ended. There was a political push, an economic push, and then the enslaved peoples themselves pushed for their own
one
freedom.
of the things that, and
we have to break?
Yes, we have to break. But I do feel one of the things we need to understand too is that even the whole, because from what I understand, the whole, what happened to the African slaves and their identity and their humanity and being stripped away from them, all of that was manufactured just for this. It wasn't as though this was an ideology that was rooted in some sort of, you know, ancient civilization that was just, to me it seemed as though all of this kind of was manifested just to get this, just to allow the slave trade to happen and people not to feel bad about themselves because they realize this is not a war prisoner from a neighboring country. We are just going to a distant land to take people.
So we don't want to call them people.
So we don't want to call them because our good Christian selves can't you know, deal with that. We can't reconcile the two. So we have to figure out a way, right? And to some extent, I'm sure there were people who, okay, it's politically convenient now, let's push it now because this craziness needs to end. So it's a dynamic time in history, I think, which makes it even more complicated because it's not as though we have the internet and
back then
phones with cameras and all the media to record everything that happens so that we know who said what and who meant what. And but we can maybe continue the topic a little bit before we open the phone lines with Janelle, but we have to break for news. When we return, of course, there'll be more on this and you will have your say, so stay tuned.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Dr. Ali seemingly calls the Ethical Council bias. 36 families receive an emergency shelter relief fund from the Housing Ministry. Man gunned down in Arima. Regionally, BVI Premier launched a new initiative to counter misinformation. Now for the details. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley hits back at the Council for Responsible Political Behavior for being what he deems as bias. Dr. Rowley's remarks came after the Council found that the People's National Movement breached the Code of Ethical Political Conduct. However, in a short Facebook post on Thursday morning, Dr. Rowley said, "An ethical council without ethics and steeped in bias is to be ignored for what it is." In a statement on Tuesday, the council explained that it met on Monday and considered two complaints submitted by the UNC. The council said the allegation was that an offensive utterance was made by using inflammatory language with the potential to cause irreparable consequences. The council said, having reviewed the speech made by the Prime Minister, is of the view that the language used was clearly inappropriate and insensitive. The council added that to be sure, this statement from the Prime Minister runs counter to clauses in Sections 2 of the Code, the Commitment section, as well as the section on prohibited conduct. Minister of Housing and Urban Development, Camille Robinson-Regis, and Minister in the Ministry, Adrian Leons, presented checks to representatives of 36 families whose homes were severely affected by sudden, unforeseen events such as fires, flooding, high winds, landslides, and heavy rainfall. The distribution ceremony took place at the ministry's head office, South Quay, Port of Spain. Recipients were from across Trinidad in areas including Davie, Laventille, Pinal, Princestown, San Juan, Sandy Grande, Santa Cruz, and Togo. Minister Robinson-Regis said that she knows only too well the sense of uncertainty people feel when disaster strikes and they are faced with having to complete critical repairs to their homes. Help on those occasions can never come fast enough. The Emergency Shelter Relief Fund therefore serves a very important role when disaster occurs to lower middle-income homeowners who may not have the financial resources or contingencies to effectively deal with the situation to get back on their feet in a timely manner. The murder toll continued to climb with the murder of a 23-year-old Tariq Sarrett in a house in Pinto Road, Arima. Arima police received a report of a shooting at Gadwell Avenue, Pinto Road at around 10:49 p.m. and went to the scene where they were led to a house. On checking the house, the officers found the body of Tariq Sarrett on the floor of the bedroom. A DMO was called in who declared Sarrett dead. Police suspect Sarrett's murder was drug-related. Region 2 homicide officers are continuing inquiries. Regionally, Premier of the Virgin Islands, Dr. Natalio D. Wheatley, has launched a new approach for reporting on the progress of the implementation of the Commission of Inquiry recommendations. Premier Wheatley stated his update on the current matters that the new approach is dubbed a Virgin Islands modern governance approach, government business at its best. The Premier said the government of the Virgin Islands' intention through the reform process is to generate meaningful and transformative results that permeate all government processes and institutions. Premier Wheatley explained that the new approach to reporting will transcend providing updates on the COI implementation progress and will reflect the government's holistic approach to development, undergirded by its commitment to optimal performance and service to the people of the Virgin Islands. Well, that's News to the Hour on WESN. I am Sierra Ali. Thanks for watching.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. So, Janelle is still with me. We're going to just kind of wrap up the conversation because it's a big topic, it's a complicated topic. It might rub some people the wrong way because of individual perspectives and beliefs. But you have some more things to point out with regards to the UN had a...
So, what I found I would have expected. So let me start from the beginning. In December 2013, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 68237 and proclaimed 2015 to 2024 to be the International Decade for People of African Descent, with the theme People of African Descent, Recognition, Justice and Development. And I would have thought the decade gone by, because we're coming to the end of the decade, with that being the decade of people of African descent, I would have seen more in the way that we have celebrated emancipation in Trinidad. I don't know, and I can't say it has not happened, if those Emancipation Support Committee and other groups have sought to integrate the UN year to really push and make emancipation celebrations bigger and more educational. One of the things that was supposed to happen in this year is to promote greater knowledge of and respect for the diverse heritage, culture, and contribution of people of African descent to the development of societies. And for me, emancipation is not only about, okay, we were enslaved and now we're free. For me, it's supposed to be a door for us to talk about what has happened since. Now that we are freed, how have people of African descent in Trinidad really contributed to the development of the country? And I just haven't found that to be a thing that we have promoted.
Because also there's this catch-22, right? Because we were kind of talking about it. Other people migrated. So if you migrate from Europe to America, from America to New Zealand, from China to Trinidad, and you choose to embrace your local country, that was all a choice of individuals. Internationally, what we saw was people from one continent was moved to the Western Hemisphere, basically, the Caribbean and North America, the southern states of America, generally speaking. And it's a different type of phenomenon. And one would think that there's like a common experience, cause for celebration. There's a lot to be had there culturally to recognize, hey, you know, this happened here. As opposed to, it wasn't just, well, you know, one by one we migrated. You know, yes, we have migrants now. It's a different story. So the UN now recognizing a whole decade, and maybe it's because international bodies have too many days, months, years. I don't know if it's just lost in the shuffle, but the UN recognizing a decade would have been not just an opportunity for Trinidad to celebrate, but also to kind of include, you know, the rest of its Caribbean brothers and sisters. We had CARICOM and we had, I think, a representative from, I can't remember which, I think, not Ghana.
It was supposed to be Ghana, but I feel like I didn't hear a lot about if they actually came.
No, right, but we had representatives from the US, we were supposed to have representatives from the UN, you know, to join in on that ceremony. You know, this was a time when the Caribbean itself could have.
Well, I mean, there's still time. Emancipation, I mean, Trinidad and Tobago, again, I don't know if you would have known, we were the first country in the world to declare a public holiday. I mean, emancipation celebrations have been celebrated throughout the Caribbean before 1985, but we made it a public holiday in 1985. And I feel, yes, us being the country, the first country to declare it as a public holiday, this being the decade selected by the UN, there could have been some sort of celebration, Caribbean-wide, probably led by us to promote people of African descent.
Does it have to be on August the 1st? Can it be moved? Because that does seem like a clunky day. I don't know if they did not realize what the school holiday was, or maybe at the time.
No, it was. I would want to assume
then.
it was selected because that was the day of the actual proclamation in 1834.
I'm not a student of history in this regard.
So
it's been a while.
I am almost 100% certain that was the day it was proclaimed, so that was why that day was selected.
I agree with you. It's just the circumstances around it. It'll be very hard culturally to kind of, make that shift. It's like, hey, stop vacationing and pay attention to
we are in the age of social media though, so that should not, it being in the middle of the holidays and people dispersed and students not in school should not be a problem now for us. We have the whole Emancipation Village. Stream the celebrations live. We have webinars. We went through a whole period of a pandemic where we became accustomed to logging in and learning about things. Why, again, I am not hearing a lot. I guess I may know because I know about these things, but I don't feel like I'm being inundated, and maybe because we're in election season, all I'm hearing about is elections.
That is true.
But I'm not hearing enough about the upcoming emancipation celebration.
One last question. I asked you this off air, but I want to ask you on air. So, don't want to try to directly compare the two, but with regards to the Holocaust, they have Holocaust museums to educate. The whole idea is never again, right? And I believe you made the point on air that when people go to plantations, they get a watered down
romanticized version.
Romanticized version.
Yes.
How wonderful it was.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Sip and tea.
Right. Should it be that we should have plantations like museums where you get the real deal? You get the real deal. It might be harder in some respects because it's not as though you could say, well, this many people were killed in this gas chamber. It's not so
the
direct.
Statistics were not as obvious.
Were not as obvious. Exactly.
Were we really recording?
But to do a better job to kind of understand, well, listen, this was not, a picnic. This was not voluntary services.
Yeah, it's not like you're working in picking apples in Canada.
This was not a 5-day-a-week, 40-hour work week thing. Those people were property.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were treated as such, and to kind of get that message across.
I don't know if we necessarily need to recreate a whole plantation.
Not to recreate it, but
I think a very good argument can be made to have a permanent fixture. We have statues here and there. We have the Emancipation Village that is set up temporarily for a period of time around emancipation. But maybe we should have a fixed home where we can have items and information and the history about slavery.
Yeah, exhibits.
Exhibits. We can have exhibits.
Because
I don't want the significance to be lost.
All right, so we have a caller from San Fernando, so we'll transition there. We'll take this call and then we'll have to say goodbye to Janelle because of time. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, morning, Sean. Morning, Janelle.
Morning.
I would tend to agree with Janelle that the reason for the choosing on the 1st of August, because it was really 1st of August 1834 that they had, it was the day that they said was, they call it Freedom Day,
right,
in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the issue of the schools not having, the children not having a avenue to celebrate, I think is one of the reasons why it is not being taught in that sense. It's not being discussed because, for instance, Arrival Day, you have school, that's a school time. You have children being able to dress up in their traditional or cultural outfits, but that does not apply for people of African origin in Trinidad and Tobago. So they don't have an opportunity, and I personally feel what they need to have in Trinidad and Tobago is something called National Day during school time, where children of all origin, Syrian, Chinese, Indian, African, can dress up in the cultural outfit. That might have a sense of bring in a lot better unity in the country. Let that day everybody dress up in their own cultural outfits. And I agree with Janelle. That first, I think it is possible for us to move that from the 1st of August. I think switching that day with Republic Day, because on the 1st of August, 1976 is actually the day we declared a republic. I think move Republic Day to that day and move emancipation to the 24th of September, which is a school time, and that might have a little more effect of having a little more, what will I say it? Having the children participate, because that's where it starts, the education starts down there. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
I like the idea, but actually I would advocate, if we want to push unity, make people choose to dress up in a different ethnicity. So then again, it's not so much, okay, I'm Chinese, I'm wearing Chinese. We get to appreciate another group. Maybe stick your hand in a hat, pull out whatever you get. Ooh, I'm wearing Chinese, I'm wearing...
I think both ideas are good. I do wonder if potentially then there are other ways to do it. You can have one day for each culture where everybody dresses up.
Of course, we always have to think about costs, eh?
Right,
those
right.
Cost factors
That's the other thing, what's available
and
who might be left out, unfortunately. But I think it is a good idea.
Yeah, I like it nationally.
In order to everybody to share, and perhaps you could get... Everybody could get a little bit of information. But
I know we have to go for a break, but before we go, I do want to take the opportunity to wish everyone in Trinidad and Tobago a happy Emancipation Day in advance.
All right, folks, want to thank you, Janelle, for coming and suggesting this topic. I myself, I'll admit, it was not on my radar, elections. So thank you for that. I think it's an important topic, and hopefully it will get its due consideration in the future, if not this upcoming Tuesday. But thanks for coming, and I know you have to run, so folks, we have to take a break. When we come back, I'll be able to take a couple of calls before we close out the week. Stay tuned.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. We just had what I would say is an interesting conversation on a topic that, in my limited experience, I feel as though, and I guess because my experience is limited and my knowledge is limited, that's why I would make that statement, that assumption that we don't give certain aspects with regards to Emancipation Day and other events like it enough consideration, especially given how important it was to the history of our country. And it's not about whether we like it or not, and it's not about celebrating the bad things. It happened. It is of us. It is a fabric of who we are. It is a part of what makes us Trinidad and Tobago. And it doesn't, whatever our personal opinions of it, of slavery, of emancipation, of the whole rigmarole, indentureship, etc. It's something that I think it's more important that the younger generations have an appreciation for, and not just have an appreciation for, understand fully what happened, so that these things don't happen again. One of the things we weren't able to bring up with Janelle is the fact that, look, there is still slavery all over the world. It doesn't necessarily look how the Atlantic slave trade looked like, but there was slavery before the Atlantic slave trade that was different in various ways. There was slavery in China, slavery in Europe, slavery in the Middle East, right? And Africa, that was potentially different, how it was conducted, but slavery nevertheless. And now that it's continued, I do think that as a nation that was built upon or started off with the labor of slaves, we should also have an appreciation internationally. When we're in the United Nations, what have you, when those topics come up, it's something that we should also take a firm stance against. However, smaller voices in TNT. We have a call on the line from St. Joseph. Good morning. Morning, caller. You're on the air.
Okay. Well, I would like to let Mr. Small know that there's a lot of work needs to be done with respect. Mr. Small, good morning.
Morning, yes, I'm here. Continue.
Yes, I'm saying that a lot of work needs to be done with respect to putting slavery in context, in that there was a major shipment of slaves straight across the continent from Western Africa into Brazil and both into North and South America. Additionally, all of the colonial powers moved slaves. That includes Germany, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, Italy. Within that context, if we were to attempt to do something locally, or regionally rather, what we need to do is build a museum of slavery located in any part of our community, ACP that is, in which we can gather artifacts with aspects of slavery, as opposed to the discussion in the direction in which the discussion has been going. So I'm throwing this out for consideration and to encourage all the people within our region to do far more extensive reading, to get a hold on it, so that when the affront that is put throughout the world, where the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were perished, as opposed to more than 14 million Africans who perished during the time of slavery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Yes, I will agree. Having a museum, having an avenue for more education, there's a catch-22, right? It's not a pleasant subject. So some people might want to shy away from it. But if you have something to experience, I understand having more reading, and that is true. But I think part of the things with having a museum is something to experience, where you could maybe see some artifacts of the act, you know, maybe have documents, hear testimonials, well, written testimonials that might be either recorded on audio or a tour guide might speak about, see potentially photographs as slavery was wound up, or illustrations of what things were like, maybe have displays so that you could get the reality and as you know, the harsh reality on a visceral level, because it's one thing to read about something, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily hit hard enough. It's the next thing to actually go there, because I think everybody, we've heard about the Holocaust, we might have read something about the Holocaust, but I do think for those that go to Germany, it's a little bit different when they go to the Holocaust museums and the concentration camps that have been preserved. And as Janelle said, we're not going to try to recreate a plantation, but to have something that you could experience that's a little bit more than just words on a page or video on a screen in the normalcy of your own home. But that's not the only thing we spoke about, folks. The phone lines are open 628-457-8623-9376. Of course, I did talk a lot about Tobago today. It's just the way how the schedule worked out with our schedule, Mr. Morris's schedule, the news cycle. But I am more interested if anybody, somebody, anywhere in this country is following this EFCL story and has any concerns over the education system. As much as what's going on between the Chief Secretary and the Prime Minister has a lot of bacchanal and is in some ways entertaining, this EFCL story for me is just one aspect of my wider concerns on the education system, which I think is, for all intents and purposes, failing the people who it is most meant to serve. Because if it was left up to private schools and so forth, yes, the upper class, maybe the upper middle class, they would be fine. Right? Public schools are meant to serve the people who do not have that option. Right? This is their option for schooling. They don't have a choice on the matter. And I do wonder to what extent you might have great teachers working in the same school alongside poor teachers. Or it doesn't even matter how skilled the teacher is. What's going on with the management of the syllabus and how schools are being managed and administered is causing problems with regards to the education of our young people. And I have concerns. And I think this is a direct, what's the way, factor with regards to our crime situation. And the police could do all the community outreach that they want. But if part of the problem is the education system is not working for people, it's not working for young men primarily, but also some young women, why are we now all of a sudden surprised that when society is essentially, whether intentionally or not, kind of sidelining a subgroup of our population, why are we surprised that then they're like, well, we need to figure out something. They don't care about us, we don't care about them. We don't care about who we hate because they didn't care about us when we were hurting. I don't know to what extent this is an ongoing legacy of slavery. I'm not here for that. I'm just here for with regards to this topic, the basic, we have an issue with the education system. I don't know if anybody wants to call in. Well, I say that and we're already out of time. Time moves too fast here on Talking Point when things get rolling. So, belay that, I am very sorry. But I would like to hear within the coming weeks and even months what you think about the education system. Let me rephrase it that way. Because I really, really think it is a powder keg of the largest degree. It feeds into a whole host of issues that we have, particularly and primarily crime. And I don't know if we're ready for when that powder keg is set off. I don't think we have it in us to now fix the mess. EFCL has gotten, according to the judge, that alone has potentially gotten out of control. What do we do when the entire education system potentially gets out of control? To be fair to the minister, I don't think this is up to her. I believe on a different topic it came up. The minister, to some extent, does not necessarily make all the decisions in their ministry. It's cabinet, and Nayagapsirali is, I don't believe, senior in the cabinet. That said, at the end of the day, she sits in the seat. The government does have overall control, but she sits in the seat, and the education ministry, I don't know what's being done with the work there on the technical level, but I have concerns. That and also the Teachers Service Commission. Again, the syllabus, the Teachers Service Commission, financial resources in order to do maintenance, renovations, and construction, the quality of teachers, I don't know. If you don't see it as an issue, what can I say? Good luck trying to guide individuals away from crime and finding proper opportunities for our young men who are resigned to not living past the age of 25. Good luck with that. Not a happy way to end the weekend, folks, but even with all of that, I will use the saying of my co-host in this way. We cannot wait on others to solve all of our problems. The government, no matter what, it's there to provide certain services we can't provide for ourselves, but it can't solve all of our problems and provide us with everything. So if we truly want to make TNT great, if we truly want to make tomorrow great, if we truly want to have a great day, we have to do all of our parts to make it so. And I leave you with that. I want to thank Janelle and our two callers this morning, and all the callers throughout the week. Mr. Calvin Morris, the minority leader, for coming on, all of our guests and contributors this week. This is Talking Point on WESN, your content capital. We will see you Monday morning. Goodbye.
WESN.
I'm Keaton Shaw, and we are WESN, the content capital.
As you age, there is an increased risk of being diagnosed with arthritis, but young